Lord?
Moving back to the right one.
What?
We're live. Couple last-minute technical adjustments here from my apartment in Boston. This is history right now. For the first time since when, we have the entire Let'sRun.com brain trust, Jonathan, Weldon, Robert, all in one place at the same time. Maybe we were all in New York at some point last year for the marathon, but before then...
John, let's act like the first 30 seconds didn't happen. Ready?
Okay.
My son likes to say start over. Hello, world track and field fans. Welcome to the live Boston Marathon preview show. We're going to share the insights we learned from the press conference, the quote-unquote inside scoop. If you're listening to the show, please comment in the comments. Make sure the audio is sounding all right. We're all sharing this microphone, so hopefully it's working. But, yeah, I hope everybody's excited for Monday's race because the media center was packed today. There was a buzz, lots of people. I've never seen it like that. I mean, in Chicago, there's like a couple people there. There was, it's hard to estimate how many people.
I was told 500 media credentials. Now, there were not 500 people there today, but this is the most credentials I believe they've issued since the 100th anniversary race in 1996. So it's a big deal. Big crowds around Kipchoge. They essentially had him do his own little mini press conference at the end because he was so popular. It's a big deal. Boston Marathon is always pretty popular, but this is the most crowded I can remember since I started covering it.
We got the band back together.
Yeah.
As John was saying, for those who hear the first 30 seconds, all three of us don't get together much. We're supposed to have a little overlap in worlds. It didn't happen last year. But Eliud Kipchoge's in Boston. You want to be here race day. You want to be here media day. Yeah, there was excitement. And Jonathan Gaul's exclusive, a little one-on-one time with Eliud Kipchoge. It took him aside. It was like the big media people, Jonathan Gaul. John, if there's other people who got one-on-one time, just...
There were, but I don't know who they were. So,
okay.
Yeah, our video's up on YouTube. I will say, Eliud, lovely fellow, amazing runner, not the best interview. His answers, he likes to play things a little close to the chest in terms of strategy, preparation. He does like to speak in sort of those metaphors or aphorisms, which are pretty cool, but you don't always, I didn't come away learning all that much. What I did think was interesting, though, talking to the GOAT, was he didn't come out and visit the course or anything beforehand. He toured the course yesterday, but didn't run on it. His coach, Patrick Sang, told me he's probably not going to run on it before the race day. And he didn't change his training at all to prepare for Boston. He was like, look, we have a system that works. It already has some hills in there. Kenya's up and down. I think this system will work for any marathon in the world. So why change it? He feels like his preparation's gone pretty well. But, yeah, they didn't do any Boston-specific training. And maybe a few days from now we'll look back and say, oh, they should have respected the course more. But I don't know. The more I think of it, I'm just like, look, this guy, he knows how to get super fit. If he gets on Boston, yeah, it's hilly, but it's still a 26.2-mile race, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was wondering what you were going to say, what Kipchoge said to you about that, because I did talk to his agent, Valentine Trout, is that who it is, John?
Yeah, Valentine, yeah.
And I said, hey, because first of all, for the record, folks, this is Rojo. Weldon always says I like to play it both ways, but I've publicly stated on this very podcast a number of years ago that Eliud Kipchoge would never win this race. Yet last night when the betting odds came out at 50%, I put down the maximum bet allowed on Bovada on Mr. Kipchoge. But I asked Valentine, I said, hey, basically your question, did you train the same? He said pretty much. But what he told me was, he said, oh, well, they're always changing the long run around a little bit. The roads are changing, etc. If you've been watching any YouTube videos, what I noticed is the roads are prosperity is coming to Kenya. Like the roads are being paved. And Valentine's like, we don't like running everything on paved. We just try to find dirt roads. He implied kind of that they would try to find a little bit hillier section than maybe in the past. But he said they're always changing up, the long run just a little bit, just because, based on the roads and, how wet it is and stuff like that.
But, John, you talked to Patrick because he had athletes who had success in Boston. I mean, this could be a major overlook on his part.
I'm trying to think. I mean, Jeffrey Karui, when he won here in 2017, he did some training with Patrick Sang's group, but he was kind of coaching himself. I'm trying to think. Has he had anyone who's had success in Boston? Off the top of my head, I can't think of it, but maybe we're overlooking someone.
I mean, I'm sure he said like a third placer or something, right? Like,
Yeah.
He said athletes have run this.
I believe so.
As long as we have that feedback in his mindset, I guess that's good.
But I also talked to Patrick Sang. I was like, do you talk to him about the weather at all? Like, does that change your race plan? Because right now the forecast looks like there could be some rain on race day, but maybe not that much. But there's also supposed to be a headwind, and this is coming 3 days out, so things might change between now and then. And I said, do you address this with him? He's like, no, I don't like it I don't like to stress the athletes out with things like that. And his actual quote to me, I'll pull it up right here. You know, he told me, I'm sorry, I'm trying to pull it up in my Google document here. Okay. We see that there is a possibility of rain and things like this, probably a headwind, but those are things you never discuss with the athletes because you instill unnecessary anxiety. So he didn't want to stress out Kipchoge with things that they couldn't control. I don't think it's going to be like 2018 where the weather is the dominant thing. Like if you're not talking to your athlete about weather before a race like that, you're setting yourself up for failure. But for this one, is essentially the whole vibe I was getting from Kipchoge's camp is we've done this before. We know how to win. Yes, there's some hills. It's still a marathon. And we trust Eliud Kipchoge, who has been through many marathons in his career. This will be his 20th, to make the right decisions and to know how his body's feeling. And if he's feeling good early, maybe he'll pick it up, but he knows the hills are coming. He knows where they are. And he's just going to kind of trust himself to make the right decisions and react how his body's telling him to react, which seems fairly sensible to me.
Yeah, Kipchoge also talked about the weather after they had the one-on-one interviews with the exclusive press. Like John, they kind of had a round table for everybody else. And one of the questions was about the weather. And I loved what he said. John, you're the one who doesn't like the aphorisms, or is that the right word?
Aphorisms. I don't. Some of them I like, but I do think sometimes it can.
You know, he's viewed as a wise Yoda by a lot of people. He said something like, "I don't worry about the weather," and his comment that he made there was, "The weather is the same for everybody, all 30,000 runners," and he implied like, "Why should I be worried about it? It's going to impact me the same it would impact everybody else." I would actually argue some people are good at hot weather running, some people aren't, but I liked it. And he said, this is sport. And somebody at the end said, what would be a good result for you? And he basically said, look, I have to accept this guy's going to give it his all. And he's like, I accept the result. Like they wanted him to make some grand proclamation. Like you do your best. And generally when he does his best, he wins. But I did like that comment about not worrying about the weather. But Bovada does have a bet up on over-under on the winning time. And their number is 2:08:30. And at first, you're like, okay, the weather's going to be like high 40s. That's a joke time for Kipchoge. But I reached out to Let'sRun.com wind guru, John Kellogg. And remember when they had the big tailwind, that was like 15, 20 mile an hour tailwind the whole way. He's like, they could run way faster. If they go from the gun, they could run 2:03. And they ran 2:03:02. So I said, John, can you do a headwind? He said, I've forgotten how much the wind happens. And then I made him do it. He did the research. Looks like it's a 7 mile an hour wind out of the east. I mean, if it was out of the northeast, it would be completely in your head, but it's pretty much into your head. And the course does go a little bit from south to north, but 7 miles an hour, gusts 15 to 16 miles an hour. And John's like, his estimation was, first of all, the 7 mile an hour, 6 mile an hour, that's at the weather station at the airport, which is higher up. John's like, at the lower level, that's not really very much wind. It's like 3 miles an hour. It's cut that in half. But the gusts, blah, 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 he thought it would be kind of the equivalent of running like 6 mile an hour wind the whole way. Long story short, 2 minutes, 4 seconds slow is what he said.
Okay. Well, I'm looking at these times. They're juiced, like insanely juiced. The under is minus 220, betting at 2:08:30, and then the over is now plus 155 according to Bovada. So you're not getting a lot of return on your investment if you're going under that. But the other thing I'm noticing here, Weldon, you've pulled up for people who are listening to this live online or watching live online, the Bovada odds. This is what there's been a huge swing in less than 24 hours.
I've never seen betting odds change like this. For those of you guys who don't know, we tweeted at Bovada. We'll take a little credit here.
But sure, Weldon should need to take a major victory.
Weldon
lap
Johnson.
right now.
I just kept getting sick of waiting for. I wasn't sure if DraftKings was going to have it in Oregon or certain states. I emailed their customer service. They said we're not going to have lines in this. Maybe they will in a few states. But I thought maybe once the BA came out and said we prefer you don't do it this year, that they might pull it in all states, not just Massachusetts, to be sort of nice citizens. So Bovada, you can tweet at them. They have a whole Twitter thing, like what lines would you like to see? And I was like, Boston Marathon. How about a line in the Boston Marathon? And maybe over under winning time. They tweet back like, here you go. And now the lines are up. They were just there on the screen. And
this opened at even last night. And as soon as this came out, I texted you guys immediately. I said, this is a ridiculous line. He's way more than 50%. Even means 50% implied odds, essentially. I'm saying you are getting so much value on that. He's won 15 of his 17 career marathons. He just broke the world record. He has a greater than 50% chance to win. You should bet on this. That's what you wrote. You wrote up a gambling guide and told people on Let'sRun.com, this is the bet to make. Now those odds, it was minus 200 when I woke up this morning, I think. And now it's minus 400. Kipchoge is the favorite. So those have shifted incredibly.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, that's 4 out of 5. So now he's 80% favorite. He started off at a 50% favorite. And I was like, you have to bet this. And for those of you who are regular listeners of the Let's Run.com Track Talk podcast, our Tuesday podcast, John, you posed this very question. I give you $1 million, Kipchoge versus the field. I'm like, even bet 50-50? It's no question. You bet Kipchoge. And, hey, this is showing the better betting markets are working. Kipchoge is minus 400, which is 4 out of 5, 80% favorite. And I thought he might be somewhere right around there, 75, 80%. Some people are saying, 2 out of 3. Vincent Kipruto and Evans Chebet are plus 900. So that's 1 out of 10.
Yeah, I don't think I'd bet Kipchoge at minus 400 now. I think about 80% is probably around right. So actually, when I was thinking about what the line would be earlier, I said maybe minus 200. I might have been a little off on that. But I hope that some of the people who got in at evens are people who are Let's Run visitors and saw our article and made a little money maybe if he wins.
Yeah, I'm glad Weldon got the line made. So that's cool. And I tried to bet my entire account on Bovada, which $900. The max was $125, so that's what I've got down. Maybe I should sell it for a profit now. Because then I could, I guess this way, either way, I go home happy. Kipchoge loses and I was a genius, or Kipchoge wins and I wouldn't make money. So
classic Robert spinning it. He's already spun it into a victory no matter how this ends.
And while we're talking winning time, so 208.30 is the time on Bovada, and what they're saying minus 220, so that's still 2 out of 3. I think the time's going to be under that. But I asked CJ Albertson, the American who led this race in 2021 for 16 miles?
More than that.
20?
I think he was 20 miles.
I would say 20, but I'm like, it could have been. I was like, CJ, first of all, are you going to get the ball rolling for Kipchoge? I think they can really run really fast if someone gets it going. I feel like a lot of times the first 5 miles in Boston, first 5K, it's really downhill, and the men go really slow sometimes. They just hold back. I'm like, if that happens, then they'll putz around for whatever. And he's like, I do not expect to be leading this race. I was like, well, why not? He's like, they're so good. Then I'm like, well, what about the first 5K? He's like, okay, maybe they hold back the first 5K. He's like, but then Boston's pretty flat after that. He's like, it's fast. Like these guys, he's like, it's Kipchoge. It's naturally whatever. And he's like, Vincent and Evans, they can run 4:20 at the end of this race. Essentially he's saying, I don't know if Kipchoge can do that. So he's going to want to try to push it beforehand. So I was like, all right, are you worried about a headwind? And he's like, not really. Kind of said almost what John Kellogg was saying inadvertently. He's like, if under 10 miles an hour, I don't think it'll affect them that much. Someone will lead it. There's enough guys of this quality, he said, that they'll kind of have a pack going. I said, what's the winning time going to be? Double check on the YouTube video. I think he said 2:02:36.
no way. That would be better than the world record.
That would be better than the course record.
You're not, in the equivalent of the world record, because you're going to add 2 minutes because of the win.
Okay.
I feel like they're not going to think about the win. I mean, John Kellogg was telling me, he's like, look, the course record, the win probably helped them 2.5, 3 minutes. He said you're probably around 2:05:30 in still conditions. So add 2 minutes to that, so that's 2:07:30. So, Kipchoge is certainly capable of that. But one thing about when to make the move, John was talking about that in his preview article. And one thing that I added to it as the editor was, look, Evans Shabbat closed in 13:55 from 35 to 40K last year. Now that sounds absolutely crazy, but it's like, oh, does Kipchoge want to wait for it to be that late? How much faster than 13:55 can a human actually run? Like, maybe it's just like an all-out mile. But it sounds crazy until the following things. One, Kipchoge's run 26.2 miles at 14:10.8 pace the whole way. So it's only 5 seconds a mile faster than what he's running in the thing. And the 35 to 40K is extremely downhill. I think it's almost 125 feet. Something like 22 seconds aided downhill. So that's 13:55 would actually be a little bit 05. Yeah, be a little bit slower than his marathon pace effort-wise. So I think he actually, if you factor in the downhill, I think he can easily, if he's rolling, it wouldn't shock me if he ran it in 13:45.
I mean, no, it wouldn't shock. Yeah, that's theoretically possible. I think the question is that section of the course comes right after all the climbing in the Newton Hills, and we've seen the last couple of years some guys come out of those hills and they're great. Evans Shabbat flew down them. Benson Kipruto flew down them. But do you guys remember? This is actually Patrick Sand coached athlete who ran this race last year. A lot of people were talking him up. Jeffrey Kamworor. They said this course is designed for him. He should be able to rip on the hills. Can he close really hard? He did nothing. The hills seemed to get to him, or he wasn't ready somehow. Like, he did not run well. He closed poorly. He didn't have a great race in Boston last year. I think Kipchoge will handle him better, but he's never been in a race where he's had to go through these hills this big, especially at this pivotal point in the race. They're 16 to 21 miles. So the question is, how is he going to be feeling at the top of Heartbreak? And that could determine how this race ends up. And by the way, I did ask him, are you targeting the course record? We've seen some talk that he's saying he's going for the course record, but back in December when he was announced, he said he wasn't going for the course record. He said, I'm targeting the win. So that doesn't mean he's not going for the course record, but I think to me, that's what he cares about is the win. And if he runs fast, he runs fast. But this is about winning the Boston Marathon.
What is his world record pace again for 5K?
Well, the 159.40 is 14:10.8.
It's crazy.
All right, so who else did we talk to? Enough Kipchoge for the moment. John had already spoken to the coaches, Evans Shabbat and Benson Kipruto, the winners of the last 2 years. We had an article up about that, so we didn't talk to them today. If you want the insight on them, I mean, they both said their training's gone well.
Sounded like Evans had a little bit of a late start. He got married after he won New York last fall. He had a bit of a nagging Achilles injury, but his coach Claudio Berardelli said, he didn't start training again until January. And start of January, that's 3 months. That's still enough time to get pretty much a full build up.
But is this proof right here of the Rojo theory of running? The man, he's at his best when he's on the prowl hunting for the woman. Once he finds her and captures her, little antiquated terms here, he gets lazy and sounds like, a little late getting started.
Well, here's the question, because we actually he got married after winning New York. Conor Mantz got married after debuting in 2:08.16 in Chicago. And, he's running in Boston as well. Scott Farble got married in between Boston and New York, and he was the top American in New York. So, but these are three men who are all married in 2022. All people are expecting big things of them in Boston. So now we get the Robert and...
well, a few caveats to my rule about who runs well and who doesn't run well. First of all, Kipchoge is married and he's been running incredibly well. But see, he confirms my thing because he doesn't live with his wife. He lives in the training camp. He only lets his cereal on the weekends, kind of like a college dating type situation. Conor Mantz, it also doesn't apply to him at all because the Mormons, when they get married, they get to do something they haven't been doing before, which a lot of people just do all the time. So this is probably a positive for him to be married.
Oh, my God.
So we'll talk about that. But enough of that before I get myself canceled. I did speak to Conor Mantz, and this was the guy that debuted. He was hoping to get the debut record in Chicago, which is
2:07.56, Leonard Correa from 2019.
And he didn't do it. He ran 2:08 something?
2:08.16.
So I said, how was your training going, et cetera. he said it's been tough. And, when you hear that, you're like, what does that mean? He said, well, it's been tough, and it's because his training partners have been injured. So he hasn't had anyone to help share the load. This is getting back to the Kyle Herbert debate and I that we were having the other day on the forums of which is more important, a coach or a training partner. So he said, it's been a little bit hard. I've been doing a lot of the reps by myself. But then he said, I've been running the reps at a faster pace, and we've been doing lactate testing and a lower lactate. So he thinks he's in better shape. And he said, if this was Chicago, I would want to break 207 on this course. So that's something that's, on a flat course. So that's something of what? Only 2 Americans? Is Rupp run 205?
Rupp's run 206. So the Galen Rupp,
3 Americans.
Ryan Hall, and Kelly Canucci
have done. So he's excited about his fitness. And then I asked him about the hills. I said, the hills are a positive or a negative for you? He said, definitely a positive. He's like, when I grew up running, I just would go out and run. It was up and down. I'd run a half marathon, this and that. And he said they've been working a lot on the uphills and doing some repeats on hills, a lot of that to get his uphill running better. But he says he thinks he has a natural ability to run downhill. He thinks he's an extremely good downhill runner.
Better than CJ Albertson.
Well,
CJ Albertson, self-professed best downhill runner in the world.
I should have had him. They were sitting next to each other. I should have said, hey, this guy thinks he's the best downhill runner in the world. But he thinks he's got a real advantage on the downhills. And he's like, I don't think that the downhills will tire me out. They're not going to shatter my quads. I do great on the downhills. And then when we get to mile 19 and the hills come around, I'm going to feel fresh. And I've been working on running up the hills. So he sounded great, very, very optimistic. And then I also spoke to Ben True, Dartmouth grad like Jonathan Gault. This is his second marathon. I didn't quite get as much optimism from Ben if you're trying to read between the lines. He said, the training's going well. We'll see. He said, we'll see. He's like, when I want to pick it up in practice, I pick it up. And, but he's talking about the fall. He said, I was in very good shape for the fall. And he didn't use that term for now. I said, the training's been a little bit different. It's harder to train in the winter.
Well, he said the big thing, I talked to him briefly, and he said the big thing is he's got a young child. And so he's getting sick all the time. They kind of have to plan his workouts around the kid and that sort of thing. So it's not like he just says, okay, Thursday, that's my workout day, I'm going to do this. He's like, I'm going to work out when I can. If I have some free time to if this is a good day to do a workout, that's the day I'm going to do a workout. If I wake up with a sore throat because my kid's been sick and they got me sick, well, I might not be able to run that much for the next 3 days. So kind of been playing it by ear, it sounded like.
So those are the men that I talked to. How about you guys?
I didn't actually talk to any man apart from Kipchoge, but I did talk to. I don't know if we want to stay on the men here. Well, maybe you spoke to someone.
Well, I saw Weldon doing what I generally do at these events. Is I try to talk to the Kenyans or Ethiopians that no one is talking to. I did see Weldon talking to Gabriel Gay, who I think is 203 flat.
203 flat in Valencia last fall.
He was 4th here last year. I think he's like a dark horse in this race. 4th is pretty good. I mean, the race last year, he was up there right at the end, right? I mean, so it's not like he was minutes behind or anything. He was 7th at Worlds, and then he runs 203. To me, those are 3 really good data points. So did he?
Did he say anything?
Nothing great. It's like, I'm in good shape. Essentially, was sort of the
classic. Yeah.
It was like, okay, ChatGPT could have done this one. Yeah, I don't really.
Don't get any ideas.
I don't remember anything really groundbreaking from that one, but he's like, I said, you're worried about Kipchoge and stuff. He's like, look, there's really good people in the field. It is what it is, was sort of my takeaway. He just sort of, gave the non-committal things. I didn't really ask. I should ask him more about the 203. Where does that put you all time these days?
Tied for 8th.
Okay.
Him and Evans Jabet, same personal best, same course, 2 years apart.
All right, can we switch to the women?
No, we gotta. Are we
Well,
done with the men? There's more men in this race. Let's pull them up here.
I feel like should we make predictions or?
Oh, God.
I feel
Predictions at the end.
Okay, but yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of fast guys in this race, obviously. I talked to Scott Fauble a couple days ago. Did neither of you guys talk to Scott Fauble at all today? Just ignored him. Well, good thing I spoke to him on the phone. I guess We knew that ahead of time. But he said his training's going well. He thinks he's in shape to run, his best marathon, or, one of his best marathons, his best marathon. He's confident. He said things are going well. He's been out in Boulder since the start of February, training with Joe Bosshard. He was top American, New York and Boston last year. That's pretty solid. I mean, this guy, he's very good at hitting sort of doubles in his marathons. And I don't know, 2:08:59 last year. I think maybe you could call that a triple. He talked for a while, like one day he thought it was all going to click, but it sounds like that was putting a lot of pressure on him, thinking, this is finally going to be my moment one of these days. And he seems to be running with a lot less stress. He's more just like, get in as good shape as possible, go out, see what I can do, but try not to lump all this pressure to finish on the podium or finish top 5. Just go out there and put together your best possible marathon. But what he is hoping for is to be up with that lead pack like he was in 2019. I don't think he wants, if someone's going out in 63 minutes into a headwind, I don't know if Scott Fauble is going to want to be with that, just because that's pretty aggressive pace. I don't think he thinks he can run 2:06 on this course. But if it's 64 minutes again, he wants to be out there mixing it up with guys and, in the lead pack for as long as he can be.
Yeah, he was on the stage, briefly. They brought up Kipchoge, Kipruto, Evan Chebet, and Scott. And Scott, he does well here, right? I guess his best performance is 2 7th
He's
placers.
been 7th twice.
It's funny, in both times,
times.
top American, run really well. And I'm like, only 7th? Like, Boston brings in enough people. I feel like sometimes in New York, you'd be top American and be top 5, and not even maybe necessarily run that great.
Yeah.
There aren't the numbers. Boston, sometimes that happens. Like, the course will just obliterate a lot of people, but sometimes you run pretty well and you're just beaten by a lot of people. I heard that also on the women's side from Americans. Alfie Tuamak, she's like, I could run really well. I'm like, I want to get in the podium, top 3, but she's like, field's loaded. Des, same thing. It's just like, they're all getting the same. If you're in the American category, you want to run your best and see where the chips fall.
I want to put you guys on the spot here. Mance or Fauble, who do you like as the top American man? Or do you think it's someone totally different, like Ben True?
I picked Connor Mance for the Olympic team. I didn't pick Scott Fauble. I think Mance is on the up of his career. He sounded very confident about the hills. Connor Mance for me.
Weldon?
You shouldn't bet against Fauble. But Ben True, he ran well in New York.
Ben True, I feel like people underrate his debut. I think he was 7th in New York in 2021. 2:12:53, something like that. But he was picking it up. He was running well at the end of that race. If he had sounded like he had a smoother build-up for this race, I would be a little bit more confident and say, hey, you could do something special. But doesn't sound like his preparation was quite as good as Fauble or Mance. So I'm inclined to say one of those two. And
I've got a new theory. Mance, I don't know why. He's not going to do the hills. Fauble's going to get ahead of himself, get ahead of his skis. Ben True, your first American.
So Connor Mance, who crushed everyone on the hilliest NCAA cross-country championships in history back in Oklahoma State, he's not going to be able to handle the hills of Boston.
Doesn't look like a good hill runner to me, John.
I feel like he's small, power to rate. He's kind of on his toes. I don't know. I would say, no disrespect to Scott Fauble. I got to pick someone. I think I'm going to go with Mance. And I do think the interesting thing is Mance, to me, seems like someone who is more likely to put himself out there and maybe overextend. If the pace goes out really hot, Mance might still be with them. And in that case, I think Fauble could have a good case to run him down. If they're both up at the front battling, I'd probably go Mance. But, I think I view them as pretty similar marathons. Yeah. 2:08:56 in Boston last year versus 2:08:16 in Chicago. Pretty similar performances. I think it's going to be a very good battle between these two guys.
You've had to rank them in terms of who's most likely to go out too hard. I would put Fauble ahead of I put Mance ahead of Fauble, ahead of True. And
Fauble's run this race
he's
3
run
times
well,
already. I think he's the least likely to make a strategic mistake.
I think he's done so well here. You might just give it a go. I don't know. I was just really impressed with him. He seemed very confident. I should just pick him, but I talked to him. My rules. I go off your PBs.
You could go off the previous year's
Or if I
results.
talked to you recently, I talked to Ben Truitt, the New York City Habs.
The Abdi Nagai theory. This is, you talk to someone before the race
So-
and then you buy in and all this
I
stuff.
wanted to talk to Fabo. I thought Robert had already talked to him. I'd talked to Fabo, I would have picked him. So, it is what it is.
But I mean, it wouldn't shock me. Although a lot of Africans, if they're not going to win, they generally drop out because they've gotten, a lot of these races don't have much prize money. What I was going to say was it wouldn't shock me if there's no Americans in the top 10 because you've got 12 guys from Kenya or Ethiopia. That's double the number. 12 guys from Kenya and Ethiopia that have run under 206. And you've got another guy that's 26:53 and another guy that is a New York City Marathon champion. So there's 14 starts from Kenya and Africa. In the Olympics, you're only facing 6. So no Americans in the top 10 wouldn't stun me. And there is prize money. First is $150,000. Second is $75,000. Third is $40,000. So everyone, obviously wants to be top 3 anyways. But then it's 25, 18, 13, 10, still $10,000 for 7. So are you really just going to step off the track and lay $10,000 behind? But, we'll find out.
All right, let's shift to the women. Any shining
Yes.
nuggets of wisdom?
Well, the big question I have heading in, and it's a loaded women's field. Is it the deepest? It was certainly going to be. It's certainly the deepest women's field in terms of runners under 221 in history. Is it better than London's? They're very, very good, both of these fields. But we've got Amani Bariso. She's sort of never broken 220. She runs 2:14:58 last fall, and just more than 2 minutes faster than anyone in this field. She would be the favorite, but there's a lot of. I wish they had women's betting odds here because I would love to see what they are. Like a lot of question marks regarding her in the sense of was that 2:14 anomaly? I don't know how you have an anomaly that's a 2:14, but she's only had one superb marathon in her life. And they made a mistake. When they introduced her today at the press conference, they said she'd never run Boston. She did run Boston. In 2016, she only ran 2:39 and was 13th place. So is she not good at hills? I mean, you think if she wasn't good at hills, she would have just gone to London. But it's just hard for me to get that out of her head.
Robert, we're talking about a totally different marathoner to what she was a few years ago. This 2:14, there was nothing that indicated she was ready to do something like that. She'd run 2:25 and won in Mexico City in August. But the 2:14, I don't know how she improved so much. Her coach said she's been banged up. He pointed out she debuted in 2:20 without super shoes. But going from wherever she was at to 2:14 is an enormous improvement. I just view Amani Bariso of 2023. I don't think she's very comparable to the 2016 version because she's just so much faster.
Yeah, it's like a completely different runner. I agree with that one.
But
I spoke to her, via translator. Those are always fun. And I said, you did so well in Valencia. Like, will you do the same here? And, some stuff's lost in translation. And you kind of saw her reaction. She's like, well, this is very different from Valencia. What's it going to say? Was the time going to be? Are you at 2:14 here? So I got the impression that she's very aware of the course, especially the past history here. And then I said, well, you didn't do very well here in the past. Are you worried? And, you get the translator, you're not going to get much of an answer anyway. But I asked her about her fitness, and she's like, yeah, I'm fit, just like Valencia. So, if that's the case,
that's my thinking. I'm like, look, all of these other women are really great, but and Boston is a different course from the other majors. It's a little bit like New York, but it's unique. So you do factor that in, but at the same time, if you're in 2:14 shape, that's a humongous advantage in any marathon. In Boston, you show up to Boston in 2:14 shape. I remember I think it was 2019. Who was the winner there from Ethiopia? Someone in the comments maybe can remind me. It's going to bother me, but she had come off running, 2:17 in Dubai. And it was just, okay, she was way better than everyone else. She just broke people pretty early in the second half of that race. No one can keep up with her. She was so much better than everyone else. That could, if there's anyone to do that in this race, it's going to be Bariso. I don't think that's going to happen, but it's a White Nash Together. That's the name.
Wow, John, that's a pretty obscure one, and I was just about to go there because I looked it up on Wikipedia. So very good here. Also, Daniel Romanchuk and Manuela Schwar, the wheelchair winners. They're at the press conference today. Looks like wheelchair gets, what is it, 1/6 the prize money.
All right, then we've already exceeded our limit for wheelchair talk on this podcast.
Wow.
So,
But it's kind of interesting. Let's just look at the Let'sRun.com polls. Who's going to win the women's race? Monty Bariso, the number one seed, is only getting 14% of the votes.
who's the favorite?
Jocelyn Jepchesky
Oh.
is getting 22%, two-time major champion. What has she done this in the build-up that would make people?
You're obsessed with these build-up races.
Yeah.
I don't read that much into
But-
them. I talked to her. I actually thought I told her last year because she was 7th last year, and that was one of her only bad marathons. Pretty much every other marathon she's run has been great. She was 2nd in London last year, but still ran well. Won London in 2021. She won New York in her debut in 2019. So she's pretty much always up there. I said, what went wrong in Boston? She's like, well, I was injured during my build-up. I missed some training time, and I got to 30K, and the injury that bothered me with my knee, I start feeling pain, and she just fell off. Because if you remember, she was up with the leaders. She was with Abel Yeshina and Perez Jepchirchir for a good portion of that race, and then faded badly from top 3 to 7th. And she's like, yeah, I just didn't have that in my build-up. I was healthy this time. She also said, I got to see those hills up close, and we did a little bit more specific hill training. So she seemed to me like she was pretty confident about where she's at, and certainly in a better spot to run this race than she was 12 months ago.
Yeah, but I didn't even get to the favorite, and this is kind of shocking. This woman's only run one marathon. Didn't go great. She was like 7th in New York or something like that. Helen Obiri is getting 44% of the vote. Former world cross-country champion, two-time champion on the track, and was right there until it was time to race in New York, falls off. And then all spring she's been saying she runs the RIK half instead of world cross country, doesn't defend her crown, does well there, runs the New York City half, wins that. But as recently as a few weeks ago, I'm not running a spring marathon. And I was always wondering in my head, is Rich just trying to get her in shape and then eventually say, hey, by the way, you are running a marathon? Like, was this just trying to lower expectations? Was the plan all along for the Line Athletics Club star to run this marathon? Because sure enough, here she is running the marathon. So she's been entered at the last minute. Did anyone, I think one of you guys talked to her. What did she say? She'd been doing long runs. Was she surprised to have been added to the field, or was all those other things just kind of made up platitudes?
I mean, you talked to Ritz at the New York half. He was indicating she's going to run Boston. Essentially, when I talked to her, from talking to her directly, I wasn't exactly sure what she was saying, like what her plan was. Because I'm like, look, I talked to you in New York, and you were saying, no, fall marathon, and now this. And she said, well, I kind of am always training for the marathon. I thought that was the impression I got. But before New York, John, the hype was unbelievable about her, correct?
Oh, it was huge. And actually, I'm realizing why she's 44% as the favorite. This is the rule of name recognition. Helen Obiri, she's joined the On Athletics Club. She is a 2-time world champ on the track. Like, she's obviously one of the best runners of her generation. But why are people picking her more than everyone else? Because she's the most famous elite in this women's race. I mean, outside the Americans, but she's the most well-known. So I think that's part of it. But yeah, the hype was out of control. She shows up there. She probably wasn't quite as patient as she should have been. Did you talk to her about her fueling at all? Well, then I was listening to the Coffee Club podcast earlier this week. They said she didn't take any fluids during the entire race in New York. Is that true?
That was false.
Okay.
Spreading lies. After the first 5K, she said.
Okay. So, yeah, maybe she extends that past 5K.
Yeah, because I knew that. So I asked her about that. She didn't act like that's important. I said, what happened in the first marathon? She said, oh, the marathon's different. You shouldn't lead, essentially, is what she said. Like,
Which is hard for her. She likes to be up front controlling things.
breaking, that wasn't her problem.
Okay.
I've seen Kipchoge lead the whole damn thing. If you're better than everyone else, you're going to beat everybody. Like, she could have won the New York City Marathon. I think the problem is maybe she pushed too hard when she was taking the lead. And the fueling thing is huge. And I think she overcooked it. So then I said, what about the fueling? She said, oh, I didn't drink anything after 5K. And she's been working on that. So that has to help a lot. I mean, this isn't 1950. Getting the proper fluids, that sort of stuff is going to help her. And then finally I was like, oh, what about your fitness compared to New York? Now, I've never heard more hype about New York. There was talk she was in world record shape, that sort of stuff. And she said, oh, I'm fitter. She's saying New York, 90%. This one, I'm 95%.
Well, I'll just say this. Did you see the Strava workout that Joe Klecker posted about 2 weeks ago?
I remember hearing about it. No,
He did 18 miles of Helen's 25-mile run. She ran 25 miles at 2:25 pace at 5,000 feet in Boulder, 2:25 marathon pace. That is faster than the PB she ran in her debut. This is at elevation. That to me sounds like an insane workout. That is incredibly fast.
She ran 18 miles at 2:25 pace?
No, she ran 25 miles.
At 2:25 pace?
Yes.
At altitude?
Yes.
Okay, that's it. Because then I was like, oh, well, you've got the girls to train with, meaning Alicia Monson, essentially, who I was thinking of. And she's like, no, the men have been helping me. The girls are good too, but I'm like, oh, yeah, like, Alicia can't keep up with her on a 15-mile run, or she could kill herself and probably try to. So, man, I think her getting a lot of votes outside of main recognition isn't a crazy thing. I mean, this is a great women's field.
Oh, she
may be the best ever in Boston.
I'm just curious. Robert is the former coach among us. Are you worried at all that she may have left her marathon in practice? That's incredibly fast to run on, I think it's March 28th.
Repeat the details again.
It was 25 miles at 2:25 marathon pace in Boulder on March 28th.
At that altitude, so it's at least probably
I think it's about 10 seconds a mile, right? That's a 2:21 marathon she ran. I don't like that workout. I would do it 3 weeks out. It sounds like she was doing it 2 weeks out, 2.5. I don't know. My concern with her is there's a lot of just watching her run is painful. I know Paula Radcliffe, the bobblehead, was painful, but Paula is pretty smooth. And I was concerned about her form, and I reached out to Jai Grunicki of The Balanced Runner. They analyze people's running form online on YouTube. I said, can you take a look at Helen's form? And she wrote back, and so you can check the article on Let's Run. Yes, there's a lot of up and down, but it's not actually a bad thing. In summary, if we set aside the question whether her form is ideal, I actually think it's pretty impressive. Maybe it's a bit expensive. So how well it translates to marathons is probably a question of her training a little bit, but I think she should be able to run just powerfully enough to get the job done. So she wasn't that worried about it. New York did make me worried. I think there was a lot of pressure for New York. Here it's awful a little bit. I think they did a good job of acting like she wasn't going to run this race and then putting her in it. But it's going to be then not talking about it until we heard this workout that you found on Strava. So if she doesn't win, I'm kind of saying she's not a good marathoner. I think the form is too expensive. But if she does, then we're going to say, hey, New York is an anomaly.
I don't think it's an all or nothing. What if she gets second by 1 second to Amane Bariso and they both run 2:19? I think you can say she's a good marathoner and got beat by an elite marathoner. But I think she has a great chance to win. And I'm trying to think, would I pick her? Do I pick Bariso? Do I pick Chip Kosgei? It's just, there are 10 to 15 women who could win this race. Robert, I assume you talked to Marion Gugi. This is a woman you're somewhat obsessed with because she was married to the late, great Sammy Wanjiru. She's been on the podium in Boston 2 of the last 3 years, coached by Steve Cram. She is based in England. So,
what?
Yeah, you didn't know this?
What?
Yeah, he's here. I saw him. He was about to go out for a run from the hotel.
I did talk to her, and I wanted to ask her, she got married in Boston. I'm like, why did you get married in Boston? So it's an interesting story. She was originally married to Sammy Wanjiru. He tragically passed away, the 2008 Olympic champion. And she said, well, I got married in Boston because my husband's from the UK and I'm from Kenya, and they kind of wanted to be in the middle. I mean, it's not really in the middle, but this is somewhere, either one of their homes, and they planned it. And she ran pretty well that year, second or third. So I didn't really ask her too much about her fitness. I asked her about her time. Her PB is only 2:20. She said she doesn't really worry about that. But she's raising her daughter, Sammy's daughter, as well. She goes to school in the UK. She splits time in Kenya and goes back and forth. But what I really spent most of my time talking to her about her was sort of a weird hypothetical. Like, what if there was no Eliud Kipchoge? And what I meant by that was, you know, if you're listening live, who was born first, Eliud Kipchoge or Semi Wanjura? Who's older? Eliud Kipchoge is like 1.5 years older than Semi Wanjura was. So Semi Wanjura really brought that marathon to the modern age in 2008 to me. It was a warm day in Beijing. You're not supposed to attack a course when it was warm. People used to be cautious and afraid of the distance. And he just blew it away. It was so mesmerizing that John Kellogg, who is just disillusioned with the sport, he was so inspired by it. He wrote his first ever race recap for Let's Run. Did a great job. We'll link to it in the show notes. So he transformed the marathon. Was the greatest talent we'd ever seen. This was a young guy that was attacking the half marathon. He was being coached in Japan. They want him to wait. He's like, no, I'm running the marathon. He wins the Olympics, makes me better than a fool. And she's like, yeah, I think he could have been amazing. You know, he was already running fast without the shoes. Imagine. Now, Sammy died, you know, had a drinking problem and spending problems and had a second wife and all these awful track problems. I don't know if he would have had the discipline. I mean, to me, Kipchoge is a massive talent. He was winning global titles at a young age. He was beating El Garouche and these guys, Bekele. And then he's had a talent. Maybe his talent isn't quite as good as Wanjura's with the marathon, or maybe it is even better. We don't know. But even if it's a little bit less, to have that discipline to train day in, day out for 15, 16, 17 years is remarkable. So, but it's just kind of an interesting concept because could peak Wanjura have been better than peak Eliud Kipchoge?
Unfortunately, it's a battle we never got to see, but it would have been pretty amazing to see him going back and forth in the 2010s.
It's crazy that he's, younger than Kipchoge.
Yeah, well, it's crazy how much he accomplished at such a young age. He died when he was 24, and he'd already won Chicago. I think he won London. He'd won the Olympics. It's nuts.
But also, I mean, not to discount that, John, but that was also the more traditional marathon career. Like, you got 2 or 3 years at the top, and that's it.
True, but he died like he was still at the top. He had just won
Right.
Chicago in that great duel with Kebede that fall, and then early in 2011 he died. So we don't. I mean, history says his peak would have only lasted a couple, maybe a year or two more, but who knows?
Wow, people, John, are WZ in the comments. Kipchoge was dodging all the questions John asked, and all his beta male hand orbiters in the comments mistake this as some profound wisdom. He's certainly an amazing runner, Kipchoge, but he's also from Kenya, which is apparently ground zero for doping. WZ hating on the Kipchoge today.
All right, Robert, another woman that you seemed very impressed with was Emma Bates. And she said something, I was kind of shocked by this. I talked to her a couple of days ago. She said this was the most confident she's ever been for a marathon. She said 2022 was a little rough for her. I mean, her races weren't all that bad. She was still 7th at Worlds. She was top 10 in New York, but she had COVID early in the year. She said she never totally felt back to normal. It threw off her Worlds build-up. This time around, it doesn't sound like she's really missed. She missed a little bit of training, like 10 days she had to back off, but everything's going well. Like you said with Conor Mantz, they've been measuring her lactate levels, and they're lower, even though she's been running these workouts faster. So everything seems to be coming together. But what did she tell you?
I was done. This was my interview of the day for sure. I went over to her, and she was so confident. I don't think I've ever seen someone this confident. She said, everything's perfect. I've never felt like this. And when we made our Olympic team predictions a few weeks ago on the podcast, I didn't pick her on the team because my thought process was Betsy Sina just ran 221. We've got a couple of girls at 218, 219. You're going to have to be 220 or better to make this team next February or March or whenever it is. And she's 223. So she was saying how great fitness she was. And I said, well, if you were running a flat course, what do you think you'd run? And she's like 218, 219. And she said, I think I'd probably run the American record. I've got that clip up. I'll try to see if I've actually cued it to the right spot. But here's a little bit of Emma Bates because I think if you hear her talk, you'll just see how confident she was sounding.
Eugene, what did you run? 220? flat course like Eugene, I think 2:18 is amazing.
Whoa.
Yeah.
So that's like 10 seconds a mile faster.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why I'm so confident. Is like it's just all the workouts have shown that I am probably ready to run the American record right now if it's a flat course. So I just want to get out.
Need to mute your computer.
I gotta mute my computer now. I want to make sure you can hear. Hopefully you heard her say that. Probably ready to run the American record right now. So that was really exciting to hear. Just she's 30 years old now, and so after I heard about her fitness, we've been having this common theme: if you're fit, the rest will take care of itself. I said, what about the course? What about the hills? Is that a positive for you or a negative? And she was like, just like Connor Mantz, she's like, I think it's a huge positive for me. I think this is the course I've been made to run. And I was like, well, then why are you running it now? And she basically sort of implied like Boston is the pinnacle, is the one that I always thought that I would be well suited for. It's got the most tradition in America, and I wanted to wait until I was like a complete stud ready to do it.
She wanted to save herself till she was ready.
Wanted to save herself till she was ready, John. By the way,
Okay, that's a show, guys.
I thought I made that analogy. I thought that analogy was all right. Okay, anyway.
No, it was.
We need to make predictions. We're close to an hour here. We've got a meet up later this evening. I got an article to write before then. Anything else before we go to the prediction part of the show?
Well, I think two huge overlooks here. We're almost 50 minutes into this show. Shows it's a testament to Boston how strong these fields are. You have not mentioned the favorite American in my book or the world champion who's running this race. Gotayon Ghebreselassie. She won Worlds last year. She's got a 2:18.11 PB. She's in this field. I mean, she has to be considered.
Oh, well, her and Lona Salpeter, I kind of view them similarly because she won Worlds, Salpeter got the bronze, and then in New York, Salpeter was second and Ghebreselassie was third. So they had a very similar 2022. Both of them are former major champions. Both of them are serious contenders.
I like Ghebreselassie better. She's younger, and Salpeter normally doesn't win. She's normally second, third. She's a very consistent runner, but doesn't have a lot of wins in the resume. But did anyone? One thing that just struck me: did she pull out, or what am I missing? Sarah Hall, was she even there today?
I talked to Sarah Hall.
I didn't see her.
Sarah Hall, I will say, she seemed like she simultaneously was like feeling like she was in a very good place with how she's running, and she was like pretty happy. I think she had this injury at the end of 2022 that was just kind of a pain in the ass. Well, pain in the IT band, more specifically, that she wasn't able to run. And she was able to go back to Ethiopia for a couple of weeks, run there. The problem is, she was telling me about all these races she's done. Now, she won the US 10-mile champs a couple weeks ago. She ran 69:30 something, I believe, in Lisbon, the Lisbon half, about a month ago. She's had some pretty solid results, but I was talking to her about her training, and she's just like, yeah, I had this illness, and then I went to Ethiopia, and then I got COVID, and she just it sounded a little disjointed, which worried me. But I think and also she hasn't done great on hills in the past. Now, she's only run Boston once before in 2019, and she gets a bit of a pass. That was off a super abbreviated build-up. She was coming off a major injury. I think she only got about 6 weeks of training in. So it's not like that result is going to be hanging over her, but she still kind of needs to prove she can do it on the hills. I think she feels like she's ready to tackle them now, but I don't like hearing, I got sick and I had this like interruption and that sort of thing. I know the results have been there in the races, but that worries me.
Maybe it's more honest, John, because I'm so sick of people blowing smoke at us. I'm so fit, I'm ready to run the race, and then like they drop out 7 miles in or something. You'll get that some years.
That was one thing I said to Valentin Trout Kipchoge's agent. I said, look, if he does lose, I don't want to hear any excuses after the fact. We've never heard of an excuse for the 9-10 years he's been on top, and I don't want to suddenly hear, he was hurt, blah, blah, blah. So,
well, we heard the ear blockage excuse in London.
But that was a new thing during the race and seemed legitimate.
Because it was raining. And
I mean, he's the only guy I've ever heard who said an ear blockage cost him the London Marathon. I'm not saying it didn't happen. I'm just saying, that was after the fact. But
we did talk to Des Linden. People in the comment section want to know about that. Well, then talk to her. She's got her book out.
Yeah, so I talked to Des. Still not even the woman I'm thinking of, but I said, Des, like, she ran pretty well, first American, or I think it's first American at New York State half.
Yep.
Which seemed to be a much better performance than she's done recently. New York did not go well for her last year, right? The marathon.
No, her lost like 3 marathons.
Or Boston
haven't
didn't
gone
go that
She's
well.
been in like the mid-teens or whatever.
Yeah. So she said Boston in the fall of 2021, relatively on her build-up went okay, I think she said.
I'll do that.
Since then, been some struggles. And she's like, look, things are going well. And I was like, okay, you're a book author. How's that going? And she said, great. It's number 4 New York Times, hardcover nonfiction or something right now. So it's being received very well right now. But she talked about the book tour. I mean, guys, she's traveled to like 5 cities.
I saw that the 10 days before Boston. She's been all over the place. She was in Boston here when they announced that the race was getting Bank of America as a sponsor sign next year. She did a reading at a church here. And yeah, she's been like 5 different cities and now she's back. I was like, I know she's tapering. That doesn't seem like the easiest way to prepare for a marathon, right?
Yeah, I was shocked because originally she named all these cities. I'm like, oh, that's going to be after the race. She's like, I already did those. And I was like, why? Couldn't she run Boston and then talk? I get maybe you want to have some build up. Oh, she's running the Boston Marathon. I feel like you could somehow do it after. Maybe, I don't know. I'm obviously not a book publicist. But she's like, look, relatively speaking, like the training through all that's gone pretty well. Like we structured most of the workouts before that and then we've done some after. And she seemed confident. She's consciously dropped her training. She said she runs like a 95 to 105 miles a week now, which is lower than she used to do. And she's like, her coach, Walt Brent's like, look, you don't need it anymore. And I brought up the analogy when we talked to Camille Herron this week. Camille's an ultra marathoner, and she's like, I run a lot less than everybody else. You don't need the super, super long runs, all the volume, she said. And I'm like, maybe crazy to make the comparison, but like everyone has this mindset you have to do more a lot for the marathon. She's like, look, I have all this lifetime mileage. I don't need all the weekly mileage. Then I asked her also about the super shoes. I was like, what about training and that stuff? Is that helping you with longevity? She's like, yeah, I am training in them more. Like you can recover faster, you can run faster. And that's another thing I think also for the Brooks athletes. I don't think their shoe was like comparable. And I asked CJ about the shoe, and he's like, this new shoe is amazing. It's not. He's like, then he said like, oh, not the old shoe has any problems, but I just meant more in general. Like the shoes are getting better, and I felt like at the time certain companies kind of, people may have thought they were at a disadvantage, and I didn't get that impression anymore. So kudos to Brooks, and Des. I feel like we've been getting this a while from her. Like, how much longer are you gonna do this? And she's like, I may be out here running my best, and that means I finished 15th place. Like, I don't know. As long as I enjoy doing it.
That's kind of interesting to me because I asked her a couple of years ago how long do I stick with it, and she's like, oh, as long as I'm sort of still in the mix and that sort of thing. She hasn't been in the mix the last few years. She's run poorly in these marathons. So I'm curious, has she shifted it? She's fine with just being 15th if that's a good day, or does she think she can crack the top 10 again? I kind of think she can. The way she was talking about her training and hitting these workouts a little harder, and then definitely her result in New York in the half marathon in March, I feel like this is setting up for her best marathon in about 2 years, maybe since the trials in 2020.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're getting a lot of nice comments. Lisa wants to know, who is that dreamboat in the middle? That would be me, Robert Johnson. Now, Lisa, we're supposed to be identical twins. Like, this may show that it's important for folks to dress well. Like, those of you listening to the audio version of the show, I'm wearing the classic Let'sRun.com super soft T-shirt that you can get at shop.letsrun.com. Then I'm wearing like an expensive new blazer. I dressed to the tilt today.
Is Lisa like an alias of your wife? Is this a fake account you have on your phone, Robert, that you're putting these comments in?
I don't know. Daniel Black has commented, nice shirt, and then Lisa says he should take it off. Now, I'm hiding the beer gut down here a little bit. I have not been running very much, Lisa. Maybe Jonathan's six-pack is what you need to see. But thank you for the compliment. Thank you for watching. We're going to have to switch cameras soon because this battery is not charging, so I think I have to use the other port.
Well, we're wrapping up this show very quickly here. But
it is charging. What?
This is not your fault. This is the way it needs to be fixed.
All right. Well, let's get to the woman who Weldon thinks is the top American in the field. We still haven't mentioned it. It's
Alvin
an hour of the show.
Tulumuk, the winner of the Olympic trials. She has a 2-year-old kid, so that's she's coming back from that. She was 7th in New York last year. She won the USA Half Marathon Championships. And I'm like, are you fully back from the kid thing? She's like, yes, I'm ready to go. I want to get in the podium.
Podium. Top 3.
Yeah. She acknowledges she may need a little help there.
Yeah.
Everyone's saying that with this field. Like, this field's crazy.
I'm excited about Tulumuk too, because I talked to Ben Rosario. It's interesting. He's not her lead coach anymore. It's now Alan Culpepper. It was initially when Culpepper came on, Rosario was going to continue coaching some of the veteran marathoners, but he said no. Alan's the primary coach. I still talk to him. We have input. Ben's the executive director of the team, but he said it's been pretty smooth change. And the way I see it, it's she's in a similar spot to where she was at the trials in 2020, which was her best race. That fall, she ran New York, abbreviated build-up. It went pretty well. She still ran 2:26, and then she came out with the best marathon of her career in Atlanta. Now, she had the kid, she had the injury, the Olympics, but then last fall she runs New York, finishes as the top American there, pretty good run, I think PR of 2:25, and she did that even though she had a bit of an interrupted build-up due to injury. This time around Boston, no interruptions. It's a challenging course, which is how she likes it. She can just focus on going out there and racing people. I think she's ready to do something great. Is that going to be good enough for Top America? I don't know. Emma Bates is obviously in really good shape as well, but I'm pretty high on Tulima also.
Yeah, I think she's got the experience. Emma Bates is very good too. Sarah Hall, I think there's a lot of question marks on the course.
Yeah.
More so than anybody else. She's never run well in the hills. Even if this doesn't go well from Sarah, can't hurt her getting ready for like Orlando or something. Actually, that course isn't that hard. The Olympics, if she makes it, I think the more experience she can get with the hills, the better. But at some point, you're just not made for the hills, right?
Yeah.
It's interesting if we're having the Tulumuk versus Bates debate. Tulumuk was better than Bates in college. Now, she was 2 years older. But, I think when Tulumuk won, Bates was like third in the 10K. And I just looked up their head-to-head career record. It's 14 wins for Tulumuk, 2 for Bates. So there's a reason why Tulumuk won the trials the last time. There's a reason why I picked her for the Olympic team and not Bates. But again, it's the recency bias. When I talked to Bates, I was like, wow, she's really on her game and really pumped. So we'll see if she can bridge that gap, to Tulumuk on Monday.
All right. I think we should get into some predictions here. Do we want to pick a podium, or do we just want to go winners and top Americans? I feel like that's a little more fun to just keep it to winners and top Americans.
I agree 100%, John. The podium to me isn't the fair way to evaluate the marathon. No, I feel like you can get third place, and I'm more impressed with the guy who went for it and blew up and doesn't get any money. So
doing a little camera change.
I don't know. Yes, the race at the end of the day, you rank them on performance, but if somebody sneaks up, even if some American sneaks up for third because everybody else blew up, I don't know. I don't really care who finishes third place in the race. So on the men's side, we're looking at the betting odds. Eliud Kipchoge minus 400. If you want to bet on the race, we'll put a link in the show notes. Oh, if you want this as a podcast, you got to be a Let'sRun.com supporters club member. Join today. Let'sRun.com/subscribe. You get our second podcast every week.
And you get one of these sexy T-shirts. The girls love it.
Only sexy when Rojo wears it, apparently.
You get a long sleeve, short sleeve. I'm wearing short sleeve because I was informed. I wanted to record this in the BAA media area. And Robert wanted to go to John's apartment. And John's like, hey, FYI, guys, I haven't put up the air conditioning yet.
It's April. I don't normally put the air conditioning in my window on April 14th,
Meanwhile, the car thermometer showed 89 coming over here. So I switched to a short sleeve shirt. Okay. Eliud Kipchoge minus 400. Vincent Kipruto plus 900. Evans Chebet plus 900. To me, that's it. One of those three guys will win the race. John, are there any other people you're putting on here? If we go off the odds, DeCisa
No, sorry.
Plus 1,400. Albert Career plus 1,600.
No.
Well, there's
Shura,
one-
oh, I've got one other guy actually.
Where's
Shura
it?
Katada plus 2,200. Because they didn't rank him like this. Gabriel Guillet plus 1,400. I think he could win this race. I would say one of those four wins the race. Kipruto, Chebet, Guillet, or Kipchoge.
but
Just covering
Can I
the-
throw out one name?
the one time Kipchoge lost in the last 10 years, 8 years, or how many years? I mean, I know he's lost twice, but Shura Katada beat him. All right, you can say
Correct.
that ear infection beat him because he has more than Shura Katada wasn't the only guy that beat him, right?
No, he finished 8th. But can I say one thing? Ademlak Belehu of Ethiopia. This guy, do you guys remember the
Oh.
Berlin Marathon last year?
If you're looking for a long shot, this is our quote unquote Budweiser long shot.
Do you remember the Berlin Marathon when
No.
Kipchoge went out in 59:51 and we're like, this is totally insane. He's running faster than he did in his breaking 2 attempts. Kipchoge was not alone. This guy, Ademlak Belehu, was right with him through 59:51 in the opening half. Now, he faded. He wound up 4th in 2:06:40. But this guy has, Robert, am I allowed to say this? He has the balls to go with anything that Kipchoge is going to throw at him. You got to be pretty fit to do that. His track PB, his lower distance PBs, 26:53, 58:54, are pretty impressive. And if he paces it optimally, I think he's much faster than the 2:06 guy, which is his PR. So if you're looking for the Budweiser long shot, and I'm like Belehu of Ethiopia.
Well, I'll get in touch with my people at Bovada because
We don't have odds on
he's
him?
not even listed. You
Ah.
can request. Can you add him? This is great. And yes, John, this is one of the few things in the marathon. You got to look, people making debuts or people who blew up in their debut. Because 2:06, you go down the list, he doesn't really show. But
He went out in 59:51.
there's 2 guys in the history who've gone out that fast, right?
Yeah.
He could win this race. That type of talent or the mindset or whatever it is, call it idiotic. We may never see him finish, top 5 in a race or something, but he's a 58-minute half marathoner. Well, obviously, because he just blitzed the 59 in a full
I
marathon.
don't think anyone else has ever gone in out faster than 61, right? Isn't 61 flat the previous fastest first half?
Oh, wow. What if he wins it, John, and this is bye-bye Kipchoge, and this is the future?
Okay.
Well, I do think people like Albert Career, the former New York champ, who don't have a fast PB. I don't expect it to be super fast, but I think there's too many guys. It's not going to be like, oh, you're in the pack. There's normally in these marathons, there's 6 or 7. 5. New York might only be 5 to 7 studs. 3 or 4 of them are off their game. You find yourself in the lead pack late and you win it. I just don't see that happening here.
All right, so
I'm going with
Individual winner.
I'll make my predictions. I said he would never win the race, but I mean, the odds are that he wins the race. Elliot Kipchoge.
Robert's just all over the
Well,
place,
that's-
flip-flopping like a bad
You can't
politician.
say he'll never win the race and then pick him. That's not allowed.
Well, I just bet $125 he's going to win the race.
Yeah.
Okay. No, he's going to win the race.
Okay.
I don't know. I wanted to root against him to be proven a genius. Now, if I pick him, I'm just viewed as a coward. I'm one of these flip-flop. I'm like that Tennessee guy who has changed his. Well, that's a politics story. We'll talk about that later.
That's at the meetup. If you want to talk politics, come to Let's Run Meetup 6:30
yeah.
at Dillon's tonight.
Anyone in Boston, 6:30 tonight. Dillon's. It's near Copley Square, so be there.
Well then, Kipchoge.
You have to pick him.
Yes.
He's such a huge favorite. He's an 80% favorite on the betting line that started at plus 500. If I had to bet with these odds now, I think I would bet both. I mean, essentially 10 to 1 odds. I bet both Evans, Chebet, and Kipruto. I think one of them has a good chance. Do they win this race 10% of the time? One of them, maybe, probably. I don't know. That's the bet now if I'm betting.
Yeah.
And I think from what you've said, I think Chebet was better last year, but I think Kipruto was a little bit ahead. So I'd go with him.
If I was betting and they actually had an odd on the guy that went on 59.40, I mean, he would be over plus 3,000. I would bet on him. That's the tough fun bet. You put $10 down at 40 to 1.
Yeah.
It makes it fun because you know that guy's going to be there if he's assuming he's here. I didn't look to see him.
I don't even know if he was at the press conference, but if he was, I didn't talk to him. All right, I'm also going Kipchoge. How about top American, Robert? Who you got? Top American man.
I mean, how boring is it? Connor Mance, my boy.
Weldon.
Well,
I feel like we did have this discussion.
I already
earlier.
said Ben Truth. I can't change now, or maybe I
Ivy
should.
League strong. There we go.
That's right.
Yale rooting for Dartmouth alum. I'm going to go Mance as well, but I think it should be a great battle between him and Scott Farble. Well then.
He's a troll for sure.
Yeah, this is great. All right, Robert, top women's champion. Who do you got?
What woman?
Yeah.
Lisa
Bodie.
Lisa is going to win. I mean, those of you not watching live aren't seeing the comments. What Lisa Kiplagat? Oh, no, that's
We didn't mention Enda Kiplagat at all. I know she's probably not going to win. She's 43, but she's the oldest world marathon major winner ever. She won a month before her 42nd birthday in 2021. She knows how to run this course. I do think if everyone just goes out really fast, she's going to hang back. She'll run some people down. If it's mutually assured destruction up front, she's going to come in and pick up the pieces.
I had a lovely lunch with Edna and her husband and her kids with my wife in Kenya maybe 10 years ago before she was a big deal. She's my wife's favorite runner. So it'd be great to see her do well. I'm very confident Emma Bates is the top American. That's my number one pick after I talked to her today.
But see, this just shows how the picks work. Nope.
Yeah. Who'd you
Yeah.
talk to?
Alafine. I talked to Alafine.
And you told Alafine Tully,
That's
like,
my
you're going to
reference
pick Alafine
point. I'm picking
Tully.
Alafine big time.
So, all right. I do think those are the two I'm picking between. And sorry, we haven't even mentioned Nell Rojas' name. She was the top American in Boston the last 2 years. I will say this field is a lot stronger American-wise than what she faced the last 2 years. So she
Rodney Dangerfield of.
doesn't get no respect.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm going to go. Oh gosh, it's tough. I think I'm going to go Tulimak. The college stat won me over. Where Tulimak always beating Bates in college. I think if they're both still really good, they raced each other in the trials in 2020. Tulimak smoked it. So I'm going Tulimak, women's champion. Maybe I'm getting caught up in the hype machine here. I think I'm going to go Helen Obiri. That workout is insane. I think she's really, really talented. I mean, everything I've seen, she has won the RAK half this year and the New York City half. So I guess that's a lot of big efforts this year, but they're also really impressive results. So yeah, but then Jeff Kosgei, I talked to Jeff Kosgei. This is the bias. I told to her, and I thought she did. She seemed like she was in a good spot. I'm going to go Obiri and Tulimak.
We haven't even mentioned. If we mentioned Sheila Chepkuri,
Who ran 2:17 in her
Second-
debut.
I just want to get the name.
Lost
I want to get the name out there because I hate
Yeah.
it when we don't mention the winner.
Yeah.
We mentioned her. I mentioned her.
Okay, that was her debut, but she was beaten by 2.5 minutes by Barisa. I mean, that's sick. I want to pick Obiri. I'd love to see Barisa sort of win it and be like a star. Like I feel like if she wins this, she's the real deal. If she can win 2:14 in Valencia and then back this up with a Boston win. Just for whatever reason, I think she's scarred from the course. Wait, why am I going to pick the Obiri who got obliterated in New York at the end of the course?
Because she's drinking fluids.
Familiar
this
name.
time.
She's drinking fluids. I got to go with John. Helen Obiri for the win. Man, this women's race could be just. I think on the women's side, Barisa could win it. I mean, if Chepkuri, probably not. Jeff Kosgei for sure. Salpeter, probably not.
Geber
But
Selassie
he's been
could
good.
win. Salpeter
Geber
could
Selassie,
win.
I mean, could win.
There's like 15 women who could win.
Could. Like on the women's side, yeah.
Abigail Yeshina, we haven't mentioned her. She was second by 4 seconds last year behind Perez Jepchirchir, who was the best woman, unbeatable in the marathon at that point. Yeshina almost beat her in Boston, and we're just writing her off. She's the top returner. Like,
So Perez,
she could win for sure.
Perez didn't even defend her title, right?
Correct. Perez will be in London later this week. Actually, next week. Yeah.
I was going to make a big bold pick and pick Sheila Chepkuri to win. 2:17 in her debut. You would expect it, but then I looked it up. She's 32. That was her first marathon. She used to run the 1500. Like, why was she in the wrong event her entire life? Like, some of the comments John's been making clearly a little bit skeptical of Barisso's improvement. Where does that come from for Chip Curry? That's who I was going to pick.
I want Roger's shirt.
No one actually wants to see Rojo remove his shirt.
No, they
I'm
want
pretty
to see
sure
the
this is
shirt.
just
They want to
trolling.
see the shirt. The shirt.
Shop.letsrun.com, but it comes free with your letsrun.com.
And people saying we're yawning. This is bad news. We have a meetup at 6:30, and I got to drive back 3 hours to Boston after that. Rojo is complaining how tired he is. Our apologies if the vibe.
I've been yawning because
wasn't great.
I got up at 4 hours sleep.
No excuse. No excuse. This is your profession. You never see like the guy in Fox Sports yawning. Rojo is gone.
But they're
Do not
You
be
guys
on the
need
show.
coffee or something. I mean,
I've not been yawning.
We don't want to pull a Grant Wall.
Ooh.
okay.
So I guess I'm going to make a pick here. Sheila Chip Curry was going to be my pick but she used to run the 1500. Where's
Come on, pick O'Beary then.
I'm-
Former world indoor champion of 15.
I'm not picking O'Berry. So I'm not high on her. Who does that leave left? I'm picking Emma Bates for the podium. And then Sheila. I'm going to stick with Sheila.
Okay. There you have it. That's our 2023 Boston Marathon preview show. We hope you enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun. This is great. The little 3-person podcast back. Everyone to get the gang all here. It's been good. Robert and Weldon made it through a podcast without punching each other. That's a win. So
No fights yet in person. This is good.
yeah.
Wait, what's the logic for Sheila Chip Curry?
She ran 2:17 on her debut. Wouldn't she improve on that? Although I'm starting to think
I
maybe
mean, she got smoked by Barisso in that race.
this is a hilly course.
Okay. How do you know that she's good at hills? I mean,
Should have talked to her today.
what she would have needed for Robert to pick her 100% was if she won World Junior Cross 20 years ago. And any cross-country course, it can have one incline. That to Robert would be evidence that they can handle the hills, right? Eliud Kipchoge won World Junior Cross 20 years ago, so he should be fine on the hills, right, Robert?
We didn't even mention that he did run World Junior Cross Country 20 years ago. That's one reason I think. But you go back and forth on that stuff. I mean, on a serious note, when I was talking to Emma Bates about whether the hills were a positive or negative for her, she said positive, but then it was weird because she's like, "Well, I'm a rhythm runner, so that would encourage flats." But she didn't think that it was kind of like, I don't think the downhills are going to hurt me too much. So, all right, everybody.
she is
We'll
a
see
world-
everybody in New England at Dillon's at 6:30. If you're not a supporters, remember you can sign up between now and then. We'll buy your beer.
All are welcome. Sheila Chip Curry was a World Youth 1500 meter champion.
So maybe she's like Ryan Hall.
There you go. There you have it. All right, everybody.